The job board flickered in the dim light of the spaceport corridor, its holographic text pulsing in cold blue against the metallic walls. Sarai stood beneath it, clutching her small daughter close, the little girl's fingers wrapping around the edge of her mother's torn sleeve. They had been standing there for hours waiting for a name that would never appear. Every job already marked filled, every position already claimed by someone with a cleaner record or a more acceptable bloodline. Her world had ended years ago. Yet somehow she was still expected to survive in this one. The air smelled of engine fuel and rust, mixed with the faint sweetness of alien incense drifting from a nearby stall. Around them moved hundreds of beings, scaled, furred or armored, each avoiding her gaze. The emblem on her shoulder identified her as Zalari, a species once admired across the stars for their engineering genius, now shunned for their part in the old wars. The Galactic Union's broadcasts had named them traitors, parasites, the spark that ignited the conflict that nearly consumed half the galaxy. No one cared that Sarai's family had been on the side of peace. When the war ended, the victors rewrote the truth, and her people became the scapegoats. Her voice trembled as she approached another recruiter, a tall insectoid creature typing lazily on a floating console. "I'm a systems technician," she said, her accent soft. "I can calibrate fusion cores, manage AI interfaces, anything you need." The recruiter didn't even look at her. "Zalari?" he asked, his tone dripping with contempt. "We don't hire criminals." He waved one thin hand and the door slid shut in her face. Her daughter flinched at the sound. Her small eyes, green and shimmering like shattered glass, looked up. Confused, "Mama, why don't they like us?" Sarai couldn't answer. She knelt and smoothed her daughter's hair, whispering, "It's not us they hate, it's what they remember." The words hurt as she said them, because deep down she wasn't sure she still believed them. They walked away from the office, past rusted ships and humming cargo drones. The massive docking windows stretched high above them, revealing the cold beauty of Virith Prime's orbit. Stars shimmered beyond like frost on black glass. She felt small beneath them, smaller than she'd ever felt on her ruined homeworld. Her credits were almost gone, the child was hungry, and she had one night left in the refugee shelter before they threw them out. Then she heard a voice, deep and human, echoing behind her. "Maybe I will." She froze. The sound was firm but warm. Not mocking, not cruel, just sure of itself. Slowly she turned and saw him standing by the corner of a refueling bay. A man in a dark officer's coat, the Terran insignia gleaming on his chest. His eyes were pale gray, focused, the kind of calm that came from surviving things most beings couldn't imagine. "I'm sorry," Sarai said quickly. "Did you mean—" He nodded once. "I did." He walked closer, his boots ringing softly on the metal floor. "Commander Elias Ward, Terran Stellar Service." He studied her for a long moment, not with suspicion but with quiet calculation. "You said you're a systems technician." She hesitated. "Yes, but no one—" "I'm not no one," he interrupted, his mouth curving slightly. "I'm short on engineers, and I don't care about old wars." The words didn't sound real, not in a place where every door had slammed in her face for years. "You'd hire a Zalari?" she whispered, her voice shaking between hope and disbelief. "I'd hire someone who can do the job," he said simply. "Can you?" Sarai looked at her daughter, whose tiny fingers clutched her leg. Then back at him. "Yes, I can." Elias nodded again, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "Then report to Docking Bay 3 at dawn. Tell the guards you're with the Resolute." He turned to leave, but Sarai called out, "Why me?" He stopped for a moment, glancing back over his shoulder. "Because everyone else looked at you and saw your species," he said quietly. "I looked at you and saw exhaustion, desperation, and fire. The kind that keeps a ship alive when everything else fails." Then he walked away, disappearing through the corridor as the hum of engines filled the silence he left behind. Sarai stood there for a long time, her heart racing, her mind spinning between fear and wonder. The Resolute. She'd heard of it. A human warship that had survived 3 major conflicts, known for venturing where no one else dared. To work there meant safety, purpose, maybe even redemption. But it also meant stepping onto a Terran vessel, surrounded by the very species who once burned her world. That night she barely slept, her daughter curled against her side as the shelter lights dimmed to a faint violet. She watched the ceiling vents hiss softly, her mind replaying the human's voice again and again. No one had spoken to her like that in years. No one had trusted her in years. Humans were strange creatures. capable of kindness and destruction in equal measure. They had conquered death, rebuilt from ash, and now they offered her something far rarer than mercy. They offered belief. When dawn came, the vast hangar of Docking Bay 3 was alive with motion. The Resolute loomed ahead, a dark leviathan of metal and light. Its armor scarred yet magnificent, Terran soldiers moved like precision clockwork. Loading crates, running diagnostics. Preparing for departure, Sarai hesitated at the ramp, gripping her child's small hand. The air vibrated with power, and somewhere deep in the hull, the pulse of the ship matched the beat of her own heart. "Sarai of Zilar," a voice called from above. It was Elias again, standing at the top of the boarding ramp, his coat fluttering slightly in the recycled air. "Welcome aboard." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Sarai stepped forward not as a beggar, not as an exile, but as someone chosen, someone trusted. The moment her boots touched the deck of the Resolute, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Neither she nor the commander knew that this single act, a human's faith in an alien mother, would soon ignite a story that would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. The hum of the engines became the rhythm of her new life. Sarai moved through the metallic halls of the human warship Resolute with quiet steps, her reflection flickering across polished walls as if the ship itself was studying her. Everywhere she turned, human eyes followed, curious, cautious, some filled with open distrust. Humanity had long memories, and war had written deep scars into them. Yet above it all stood Commander Elias Ward, unshaken, calm as the stars themselves. He had assigned her to the engineering deck where the ship's heart pulsed like a living creature. The air smelled of oil, ozone, and human determination. Terran machines were raw and powerful, built to endure pain. While Zilari designs were elegant, made to avoid it, Sarai ran her fingers along the main reactor's conduit, feeling the heat beneath the plating. It was strange and beautiful at once, so primitive in design yet so alive in purpose. Her human co-workers kept their distance at first. A tall mechanic named Harper muttered, "Should have stayed on her own ship," as Sarai passed. Another engineer, a woman with sharp eyes and a shaved head, whispered to her partner, "Ward's gone soft." "Hiring one of them," Sarai pretended not to hear. She had heard worse on 100 stations across the galaxy. Still, each word struck deep, not because they were cruel, but because she understood why they felt that way. She worked harder than anyone, sleeping little, speaking less. Her slender hands danced over the controls, recalibrating power lines that had been unstable for months. The chief engineer watched her once, then muttered, "I don't know what kind of magic she's using, but the readings are clean for the first time in weeks." Slowly, the whispers began to fade, replaced by quiet curiosity. Humans respected results, even when they came from someone they didn't understand. Commander Elias visited her often, always observing from a respectful distance. "You work faster than my entire department," he said once, half smiling. "You make it look easy." Sarai shrugged gently. "In my world, precision was survival," he nodded, understanding without asking more. That was what she liked about him. He never asked for explanations she wasn't ready to give. Her daughter, Lyra, spent her days in the nursery module with other children of the crew. Humans had a way of turning even cold steel into warmth. The nursery's walls were painted with stars and creatures from Earth's oceans. Glowing softly under the lights one day, Elias stopped by and found Sarai watching her child draw on a digital slate. "She's adapting well," he said. "Better than I did when I first left Earth." Sarai smiled faintly. "Children adapt faster than adults. Their hearts heal quicker." "Maybe," Elias said, glancing at her. "Or maybe she's healing because she finally has a reason to." In those quiet moments between work shifts and reactor alarms, Sarai began to understand humans beyond the stories the galaxy told. They were not just warriors or conquerors. They were dreamers who fought because they wanted to protect something invisible yet sacred. Humanity had been called reckless by the Council, dangerous by the Zilari, but standing on their ship, she saw another truth. They were the species that refused to give up even when every system turned against them. One night during a maintenance cycle, the ship entered deep silence, the kind that only came when the engines powered down for calibration. The corridors were dim, only the red emergency strips glowing faintly underfoot. Sarai stayed behind after her shift, alone with the hum of machinery and her thoughts. She stared at the reactor's pulse, listening to its slow beat like a heart. That was when she sensed movement behind her. "You shouldn't be here." Alone, came a low voice. It was Harper, his expression unreadable. His hand rested casually near the plasma wrench on his belt. Sarai turned slowly. I was finishing recalibration, she said softly. The cycle's not stable yet. Harper stepped closer. You think we don't know what you're doing? He said, his tone sharp. You've got access to our systems now. Terran encryption, power cores, defense maps. If your people are still working against us, stop. Another voice cut through the tension. Calm but firm. Commander Elias stepped out from the shadows. His gray eyes locked on Harper. That's enough, Harper stiffened. Sir, I was just accusing my engineer of treason? Elias said coldly. Without proof? Harper swallowed hard, the silence between them tightening like a wire. Elias took one step closer. We judge by actions here, not assumptions. She's earned her place, you haven't earned the right to take it away. Harper lowered his gaze, muttered something and left. Sarai stood frozen, her pulse loud in her ears. Elias turned to her, his voice softening. You'll have to forgive them, he said. We've seen too much to trust easily. She met his eyes and whispered, And yet you trusted me. Someone has to be first, he said, then gave a small smile. Besides, you remind me that we can still be better. For the first time, she laughed, a quiet, fragile sound that surprised even her. It echoed faintly in the chamber like music no one had heard in years. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not affection, but understanding. A bridge built in silence between two broken worlds. The next morning, she arrived early to the control deck. The ship was awakening, lights flickering on like sunrise across metal. Her daughter ran ahead to wave goodbye before nursery hours. And for a brief moment, Sarai felt almost human herself. Elias stood near the main viewport, watching the distant nebula that glowed in crimson hues. Ever been out there? He asked, past the Dathis Veil. Once, she said quietly, before it burned. He looked at her, reading the shadow in her tone, but said nothing, just nodded. As the ship powered up and the engines roared to life, Sarai realized she no longer felt like an intruder. The Resolute had accepted her piece by piece. And though the galaxy outside remained full of hate, inside these walls something fragile and extraordinary was beginning to form. But far beyond the nebula, in the dark reaches of Zalari space, an encrypted signal pulsed through the void. Searching for her, the message carried her old family crest, glowing faintly against static. It would reach the Resolute soon, and when it did, the fragile piece she had found would tremble. For now she stood quietly beside her commander, watching the stars drift by, unaware that her past was already on its way to find her again. The night cycle on the Resolute was meant to be peaceful. The lights dimmed to a soft blue glow, the engines settled into their steady hum, and the crew drifted into the rhythm of deep space silence. But that night, peace came with a pulse of danger hidden beneath the static of the ship's comm systems. In the dark of the control room, a faint chime broke the quiet. A notification that should not have existed. An encrypted transmission had slipped through the Terran firewall. Sarai sat alone at her workstation reviewing power logs. When the signal appeared like a ghost on her display, the screen flickered, symbols forming and dissolving in a pattern only she could recognize. Her breath caught as she leaned closer. Her hands trembled as she entered a manual decrypt code, one that no human should have known. The image that appeared was blurry, distorted by static, but she would have known that voice anywhere. Sarai, it whispered. They found me. They're coming for you. Don't trust anyone. Then the signal died, leaving only silence and her reflection staring back in shock. Her brother Aaron had been declared dead years ago. He was a leader of the Zalari rebellion that had tried to overthrow the warlords who sold their people into slavery. His death had been a lie, and now his warning meant someone else knew she was alive. Her fingers hovered over the console as if touching the air could change what she had seen. Then came the sound of approaching boots. Commander Elias stepped in, his coat unbuttoned, his expression calm but alert. You're still working? He asked. You've been at this for 16 hours. Sarai turned off the monitor quickly, her voice thin. Just finishing diagnostics? Elias watched her closely, his gray eyes narrowing slightly. Not an accusation, but concern. Something's wrong, he said quietly. I can feel it. She hesitated, torn between truth and fear. If she told him about the message, the humans might see her as a threat. If she stayed silent, she might doom them all. The memory of his words echoed in her mind. Someone has to be first to trust. There was a signal, she said finally, her voice shaking. It came through the restricted channels. I shouldn't have seen it. Elias stepped forward. What kind of signal? Zalari encryption, she whispered. It was from my brother. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with history. Your brother? Elias repeated slowly. The same Aaron who led the uprisings? She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. He tried to stop the warlords. He wanted peace. But they called him a traitor. He told me they're coming, for me. Elias said nothing for a long time. His jaw tightened as he processed every word. You should have told me sooner, he said. We could be compromised. I didn't want to endanger your crew, she whispered. You gave me a home when no one else would, his voice softened. You didn't endanger us, Sarai, secrets do. He turned to the console, typing a command to trace the signal, but the system replied with a red flare. Access denied. Terran encryption breached. It's not just a message, he said grimly. Someone's watching. Alarms blared suddenly, red lights flooding the room. The voice of the ship's AI crackled through the speakers. Unauthorized intrusion detected in the lower comm arrays. Elias barked into his comm. Security teams to Deck 9 now. Then he turned to Sarai. Stay here, but she shook her head. No, I know their methods. I can stop them faster. Together they ran through the corridors, the metal floor trembling under the warning sirens. Crew members moved aside, some staring at her with suspicion again. Whispers spreading like sparks. It's her people, someone muttered. She brought them here. Sarai ignored it. Focusing on the console ahead as they reached Deck 9, the air smelled of burning circuitry. The comm tower's access hatch had been forced open, sparks dripping like liquid light. Sarai dropped to her knees, opening a secondary panel. They planted a worm code, she said, her hands flying over the controls. It's routing through my old encryption signatures. They're trying to use my identity to bypass your defenses. Elias crouched beside her, his voice steady even as smoke filled the air. Then erase yourself from the system, break the link. If I do that, my records vanish, everything, she said. They'll think I really am a spy. Let me handle the crew, he said. Just save the ship. Her fingers moved faster, the screen flickering between green and red. The worm fought back, rewriting itself as she deleted it. It was like fighting a shadow of her past. Each line of alien code, a memory of a war she had tried to forget. Sweat dripped down her forehead, sparks stung her hands. Elias stood guard beside her, weapon drawn, scanning the corridor for intruders. Finally the code broke, the screen going dark. The alarms slowed, the light steadied, and the Resolute breathed again. Sarai slumped against the wall, her chest heaving. It's done, she whispered. Elias holstered his weapon and crouched beside her, his expression softening. You saved us. They'll still blame me, she said quietly. They always do. He looked at her for a long moment. Then I'll take the blame with you, he said. Because I believe you. Those words hit harder than the blast of any weapon. For a heartbeat, she forgot the smoke, the fear, the alarms. She saw only the strange light in his eyes, the kind of faith that no one had ever given her before. But even as the ship's system stabilized, Sarai knew this was not the end. Her brother's message had been a warning, and the code she just destroyed was only the first move. Somewhere out there in the dark space between worlds, the warlords who ruled what remained of her people were preparing something far worse. And now that she had been found, the humans who had trusted her would become their next target. As Elias walked her back to her quarters, the stars outside the viewport stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to a story that was only beginning to unravel. He stopped before leaving, his voice quiet. If this turns into something bigger, I want you on my side, not as a refugee, not as a Zalari, just as Sarai. When he left, she stood by the glass holding her daughter close, watching the infinite night beyond. The reflection of the Resolute shimmered against the stars like a lone flame surrounded by darkness. Somewhere out there, her brother was still running, and the past she had buried was already rising from the ashes to meet her once more. The storm began without warning. The Resolute drifted through a silent field of wreckage, broken satellites, shattered hulls, the skeletal remains of ships that once belonged to her people. Sarai stood beside the viewport, her reflection hovering against the void like a ghost of who she used to be. Her daughter slept in her arms, her small chest rising and falling in rhythm with the hum of the engines. But beneath that calm, Sarai felt it, A wrongness in the air. A whisper in the ship's pulse. Something unseen yet close. Commander Elias stood. On the command deck, his eyes locked on the radar. Unknown contacts, the officer announced. 3. No 5 signatures approaching fast. The room tensed instantly. Every human soldier snapping into readiness. Identify them, Elias ordered. Unknown, sir, came the reply. They're not broadcasting any standard code. Then the view outside lit up as energy flares erupted across the stars, burning trails cutting through the darkness like falling comets. The ship shook violently, alarm screaming. Direct hit on the aft shields, shouted the engineer. Power dropping. Elias' voice stayed steady. Return fire. Pattern Delta 6. The deck vibrated under the roar of Terran railguns, bright streams of plasma crossing the void. But the attackers were fast. Solari warlord ships marked with red emblems of rebellion. They had found her, just as her brother warned. Sarai ran to the engineering bay, Lyra clinging to her hand until a medic rushed forward to take her to safety. Stay with them, baby, Sarai whispered. Don't look back. Then she sprinted toward the reactor, smoke already leaking from the vents. The scent of burning metal filled the corridors, screams echoing through the comms. The ship wasn't just under attack, it was being hunted. In the chaos, Harper appeared beside her, his face streaked with soot. You said this wouldn't happen, he shouted over the noise. You brought them here. Sarai grabbed a plasma wrench, slamming open a damaged conduit. If you want to blame someone, do it after we survive, she said. Right now we need to reroute power to shields. He hesitated, then nodded, anger turning to grim focus. Together they worked like two halves of a machine. The hull groaned as another blast hit, throwing Sarai across the deck, sparks cascading around her like falling stars. She forced herself up, her hands bleeding. Status on Deck 5? She shouted into the comm. Breaches in sectors 4 and 7, came the panicked voice, containment fields failing. Seal the doors, she said. Now, Elias's voice came through next, steady despite the chaos. Sarai, we're losing thruster control, can you stabilize it? Not unless I bypass the main grid, she replied. It'll burn out half your systems, do it, he said, no hesitation. We're not dying out here. She ripped open the manual override, her hands shaking as she connected raw cables. Electricity surging through the room. The lights flickered and steadied. The hum of the engines deepened, and the ship roared forward again. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of the reactor. She could almost feel the ship breathing with her, wounded but alive. Commander, Harper called through the comms. Shields are back at 40%. Good, Elias said. Because we're not running anymore. He turned toward the viewport, his gray eyes like steel under the red emergency light. Lock weapons on their lead ship. The railguns fired in a deafening blast, cutting through the enemy's formation. One Zalari cruiser exploded in a cascade of light. Another broke apart, its engines tearing free. But there were still too many. The Resolute couldn't take another direct hit. Commander, came a voice from the tactical officer. Incoming boarding pods, Elias gritted his teeth. They're trying to breach the hull. Let them try, he said, drawing his weapon. They won't find us unprepared. In the lower corridors, the first impact tore open the walls, smoke billowing as armored warlords stormed through. Their armor shimmered with dark energy, their eyes cold and hollow. Sarai grabbed a fallen rifle from the floor, firing at one who broke through engineering. The blast struck his chest plate, sending him backward. The recoil numbed her arms. She had never fired a human weapon before, but she didn't stop Lyra. She whispered into her comm. Lyra, where are you? Static answered, then a faint cry, Mama? Stay hidden, I'm coming, she said. Her voice broke on the last word. She ran through the smoke-filled hallways, blaster fire echoing around her. The floor trembled with each impact. Elias found her near the junction, his uniform scorched. The nursery's been hit, he said. She froze, her heart collapsing inside her chest. He grabbed her arm. We'll find her. You don't understand, she gasped. She's all I have. Then we'll get her back, he said. His voice unshakable, they pushed through the wreckage together, moving like shadows through the smoke. The hallway ahead was collapsed, wires hanging like veins. Fire burned in pockets along the walls. Lyra, Sarai screamed, her voice raw, then a faint sound, a whimper, a cough. From behind a half-melted door, Elias pulled his plasma cutter, slicing through the debris until it gave way. And there she was, small, trembling, covered in ash but alive. Sarai fell to her knees, clutching her daughter, tears streaking through the soot on her face. Elias knelt beside them, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Told you we'd find her," he said softly. Then another explosion ripped through the hull. Throwing them all to the ground, the lights flickered and went black. The Resolute was crippled, its power fading, its hull bleeding light into the void. Through the fractured glass of the corridor, Sarai could see the stars spinning slowly, and among them the burning wrecks of the enemy fleet. Humanity had not gone down quietly. Elias pulled himself up, blood running down his forehead. "Get her to medbay," he said. "I'll handle the rest." Sarai looked at him, her voice trembling. "You can't fight them alone." He smiled faintly. A human smile, tired, stubborn, fearless. That's what humans do best. As she carried her daughter through the wreckage, Sarai looked back once, seeing the commander standing in the doorway with the ship's red light behind him like a fading sun. Somewhere in that moment she understood what made humans so terrifying to the galaxy. It wasn't their weapons or their wars. It was their will. The refusal to surrender even when everything was already lost. And in the silence between the explosions, as she ran through the dying corridors, Sarai made a vow. She would not let this be the end of them. Not for the humans who trusted her. Not for her daughter. Not for him. The galaxy had taken everything from her once, but this time she would fight to take something back. The ship drifted in silence after the storm, floating like a wounded giant through the debris field. The once bright corridors of the Resolute were dim now, lit only by flickering panels and the orange glow of emergency beacons. Every surface carried the scars of the battle, melted plating, shattered glass, the smell of burnt circuitry clinging to the recycled air. Sarai walked through the damaged halls, her body aching, her heart heavier than the void outside. She could still hear echoes of the screams, the gunfire, the chaos that had nearly swallowed them whole in the medbay. Rows of wounded humans lay beneath sheets of pale light, quiet except for the soft hum of medical drones. Lyra sat near one of the beds, holding her mother's hand, trying to stay brave, though her small eyes glistened with tears. Across the room, Commander Elias stood against the wall, his uniform torn, his face bruised but calm, watching over his crew like a father who refused to break in front of his children. When he saw Sarai enter, he straightened slowly. "How's engineering?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. "Alive," she said softly. "Barely, but alive. That makes two of us," he replied, trying to smile though the weariness in his eyes betrayed him. "We've lost comms, propulsion, half our weapons. We're a floating target now." "We can fix it," she said quickly. "If we get to the next star system, I can rebuild the relay core manually." "You've done enough already," he said. "You should rest." "If I rest, we die," she answered, her voice quiet but unyielding. Elias looked at her for a long moment before nodding. "You sound like one of us now." "Maybe I've learned from the best," she said. And for a heartbeat they shared something that felt like peace, fragile but real. As they left the medbay, Sarai saw the way the humans looked at her now, not with suspicion but with respect. These were the same faces that once turned away when she passed, now offering nods, silent gratitude. She had earned their trust with sweat and blood. But part of her still wondered if it would last when they learned the truth, that the attack had come because of her. Hours passed, the ship drifting in the dark, every system running on reserve power. Outside, the stars shimmered coldly, indifferent to human or alien pain. Sarai returned to the engineering bay, the air heavy with smoke and silence. She touched the reactor's core gently, whispering to herself, "Come on, old friend. Don't give up yet." The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Elias again, carrying a small data tablet. "Intel from the wreckage," he said, handing it to her. "We found fragments of a distress beacon among the enemy debris. It matches your brother's encryption codes," she froze. "Aaron?" "Yes," Elias said. "Your brother was among them, or near them. He may have tried to stop the attack." Sarai stared at the glowing text, her throat tightening. "Then he's alive," she whispered. "Maybe," Elias said carefully. "But if he is, he's in danger, and so are we. They won't stop until they silence both of you." Sarai set the tablet down and leaned against the console. "This isn't just a war for territory," she said. "It's a purge. The warlords don't want peace, they want erasure. They can't let anyone believe that humans and Zilari could stand together." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we make them believe." Before she could answer, the ship's AI spoke weakly through the static. "Long-range scan detected. Multiple vessels inbound, Vector 612. Estimated arrival in 40 minutes, Elias exhaled. They found us again. He turned to Sarai. How long to get the reactor back to full power? If I reroute the auxiliary grid manually, maybe 30 minutes. Do it, he said, and Sarai. This time we fight on our terms. She moved like lightning through the damaged systems, sparks flashing around her hands. Harper and the other engineers working beside her without hesitation now, sweat and determination blending into the hum of the deck. For the first time, she felt like part of something greater than survival. She felt purpose as the engines began to roar back to life. Elias's voice came through the intercom. All crew to stations. Prepare for possible engagement. The Resolute trembled as power surged through its veins, the lights brightening like dawn through the steel corridors. Sarai wiped the grime from her face, whispering, "Come on, don't fail me now." Then the enemy fleet appeared on the horizon, dark silhouettes against the stars, moving in formation like predators closing in on wounded prey. Their signals filled the comms, cold and familiar. To the human ship Resolute, surrender the Zalari trader aboard or be destroyed. The voice belonged to Kareth Vorn, one of the warlords who had enslaved her people. His tone was calm, almost bored. You are outnumbered, outgunned and already dying. Choose mercy while you still can. Elias stood before the main screen, his face unreadable. This is Commander Elias Ward of the Terran Stellar Service, he said. You want her? You'll have to come through every human on this ship. The channel cut off, leaving silence before the storm. In the engineering bay, Sarai's hands shook as she adjusted the final relays. They'll come for me, she whispered. Harper glanced at her. Then we make sure they regret it. The engines stabilized, their low hum turning into a powerful thrum that shook the deck. She felt the vibration in her bones, a heartbeat that wasn't hers but somehow belonged to her too. Up on the bridge, Elias gave the order. All hands, ready weapons. Engage on my mark. The stars outside began to move. The Resolute turned slowly toward its enemies. Light reflecting across its battered hull, Sarai looked up at the ceiling. Knowing he was up there facing death again without fear, she whispered to herself, "Don't you dare die for me." Then the stars lit up as the first barrage began. Fire and fury filling the void, the Resolute charged forward. A single wounded ship against an empire. But in that moment, it wasn't just a human vessel. It was something new, something born of both worlds, a symbol of everything the galaxy feared and hoped for all at once. And somewhere deep inside the chaos, Sarai felt it, that this battle wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that would change the laws of the stars forever. The first shot struck the Resolute like a hammer from the heavens. The entire ship shuddered, lights flickering to red as the stars outside vanished behind a wall of plasma fire. Sarai gripped the edge of the console as the deck tilted beneath her. Alarms screaming in every corridor somewhere above her. Elias' voice cut through the chaos, steady as iron. Hold your positions. All power to shields, the humans answered like one mind. Their voices layered with fear but driven by something stronger. No one ran. No one surrendered. Sarai felt the vibration through the hull, the heartbeat of a dying ship that refused to fall. Smoke filled the engineering bay, choking the air, sparks dancing like fireflies through the haze. Harper shouted over the noise, "They're targeting the reactor chamber." "Then we give them something to choke on," Sarai said, her eyes sharp. "Reroute everything to the hybrid core." She ran to the main console. Her hands flying over the keys, she opened the Terran systems to Zalari tech, merging power signatures that were never meant to coexist. The panels pulsed with conflicting colors, human blue and alien gold twisting together into blinding white. "You're overloading it," Harper warned. "We'll fry the entire ship." "Only if we stop now," she said, her voice calm. "Trust me." Above them, the bridge was chaos turned to discipline. Elias moved between his officers, giving orders with surgical precision. "Angle the bow, vent starboard plasma, fire counter volley on my mark." His crew obeyed without question. The view through the cracked viewport showed a storm of light, enemy cruisers surrounding them like wolves, missiles streaking past in arcs of red and silver. Then a voice broke through the static of the comms. "Deep and cruel, Commander Ward," it said. "How many times will you risk your people for one alien?" It was Kareth Vorn, his tone dripping with satisfaction. "Give her to me, and I will let your species live to see another sunrise." Elias stared at the comm for a long moment, then replied, "You mistake us for something small." His words carried across every deck. "Humanity doesn't trade lives, we defend them." He cut the channel and said quietly, "Fire everything." The Resolute unleashed hell. Railguns and plasma cannons screamed through the void, carving trails of light across the darkness. The human ship danced between the giants, moving with impossible precision as if guided by something unseen. Sarai's hybrid reactor came online at full strength. The power coursed through every circuit, turning the ship's lights bright enough to blind. "Stabilization at 80%, she said, her voice echoing through the intercom. "The Resolute is yours, Commander." "Then let's remind them what humans can do," Elias said. His voice was low, steady, and filled with the weight of every war ever fought by his kind. The ship moved like it was alive. Every shot from the enemy that should have torn them apart met a shield of glowing gold-blue energy. Every weapon they fired hit harder. Faster, more precise, the humans cheered, their fear turning to fire. The galaxy had always called them reckless, but in that moment, they were more than reckless, they were unstoppable. Kareth Vorn's fleet began to break, his ships scattering as the Resolute cut through them like a blade of light. But the warlord wasn't done. His flagship moved forward, massive and monstrous, its guns glowing with enough power to crack moons. "If I must end you myself," his voice thundered across the comm, "I will erase your name from every star." Sarai saw the energy spike from his reactor core. She knew the weapon, an ancient Zalari sun cannon capable of vaporizing cities. "Elias," she shouted, "he's charging the core. You can't take that hit." "Suggestions?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "You'll have to override his weapon through the hybrid network," she said, "but it'll expose the entire ship to feedback." "How long?" "1 minute. Then make it count." Her hands trembled as she opened the encrypted Zalari interface. Her species' technology was alive, emotional, unpredictable. She reached into its code the way one might reach into a storm, feeling it respond to her presence. For a moment she saw flashes, her homeworld burning, her people falling, her brother's voice calling her name through the smoke. She pushed past the memories and focused on the now. The hybrid reactor roared like a beast. Energy surged through her veins, lighting her skin with faint luminescent lines. "It's sinking," she said, her voice weak. "Just a little longer." Harper stared in awe. "You're becoming part of it." "Maybe that's what it needed," she whispered. Elias watched the reading spike on his console. "Sarai, pull back. You'll kill yourself." Her voice came through, quiet and certain. "Not if it saves us." The Resolute shuddered as light flooded every corridor, a pulse of living energy rippling through metal and bone alike. Sarai screamed as the feedback tore through her body, but she didn't stop. The enemy's weapon began to falter, its glow flickering, then twisting back toward itself. Kareth's voice rose in disbelief. "What have you done?" A blinding explosion filled the void. The warlord's flagship imploded, swallowed by its own power, fragments scattering across the stars. The shockwave struck the Resolute, tossing it end over end, systems dying one by one. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The bridge was dark, smoke curling through the air. "Status," Elias said weakly. "Reactor offline, shields gone." "Life support minimal," came the reply. "Casualties?" "Unknown." He turned to the intercom. "Sarai," he said, "report." No answer. "Sarai?" Still silence. He ran from the bridge, down through broken corridors, the ship groaning around him, until he reached engineering. The room was half collapsed. The wall scorched. The reactor pulsed dimly. Like a dying heart, Sarai lay beside it, her skin pale, her breath faint but there. Her eyes fluttered open when she felt his hand on her shoulder. "Did it work?" she whispered. "Yes," he said softly. "You did it." A weak smile touched her lips. Then, "Humanity wins again." "No," he said, his voice breaking. "We all win." He carried her to medbay as the stars outside began to brighten again. The Resolute floated among the ruins of the enemy fleet, scarred but unbroken. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, the kind of silence that follows history being rewritten. And somewhere deep within the ship's core, the hybrid reactor still glowed faintly, its colors intertwined. Blue and gold, human and Zalari, alive and one. The light of a new dawn rose across the wreckage of the battlefield. The stars were silent witnesses to the price that had been paid. The once mighty Resolute floated wounded yet alive, drifting between the shattered remains of enemy ships like a ghost that refused to die. Inside her, the hum of emergency systems was faint but steady, a heartbeat still beating after everything should have ended. Commander Elias walked through the broken corridors, every step echoing in the hollow quiet. He passed faces that were tired yet proud, men and women who had fought with everything they had. Humanity had survived again, not through power but through something deeper, through will, through faith, through the fragile trust between a human and an alien who refused to give up on each other. In the medbay, the smell of disinfectant mixed with the metallic tang of recycled air. Sarai lay beneath the glow of recovery lights, pale but breathing. Her small daughter Lyra sat by her side holding her mother's hand, whispering stories about stars and ships as if to keep her awake. Elias stood at the doorway for a long time before stepping closer. He looked at her face, the one that had once belonged to an enemy, and felt a quiet ache in his chest. This was not just survival, it was something holy, something that changed the meaning of war itself. When Sarai's eyes opened, they were dim at first, like stars struggling through a storm. She saw him and tried to smile. "Did we make it?" she asked, her voice a soft breath. "You did," he said, pulling up a chair beside her. "The fleet is gone. The Council's already calling. They want to know how a single Terran ship destroyed 7 war cruisers." She tried to laugh, but it came out as a faint cough. "Tell them it was luck." He shook his head. "No. I'll tell them it was you." She looked around the room, the faint hum of machines blending with the soft murmurs of the wounded. "And the crew?" she asked. "We lost 23, he said quietly. "But hundreds more lived because of what you did. Because you believed." Sarai closed her eyes for a moment, her hand tightening on his. "It wasn't belief," she whispered. "It was debt. Humanity gave me a chance when no one else would. I only returned it." Elias watched her, his jaw tightening. "Then it seems the universe finally understands what humans see in you." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not empty. It was heavy with gratitude, pain, and something unspoken that neither dared to name. Outside the viewport, the light of a nearby star bathed the ship in soft gold. Making the scars on its hull glow like silver veins, it looked alive again, reborn. Days passed as the Resolute limped toward the Galactic Council's central station. Their arrival sent ripples across every system. No one had expected the humans to survive, let alone win. The warlords who had terrorized the borders for decades were gone, destroyed by their own greed and by a single act of unity that the galaxy couldn't explain. When the ship docked, ambassadors, soldiers, and reporters flooded the docks to see it with their own eyes. The symbol of defiance, the legend of a ship that refused to surrender. Elias helped Sarai walk down the ramp, her daughter holding her other hand. The crowd went silent as they appeared, a human commander beside a Zalari mother. A picture of everything the galaxy had once feared but now desperately needed. The council chamber was vast, its domed ceiling filled with stars. The voices of dozens of species murmured through the hall as Sarai took her place beside Elias at the center. The high speaker of the council, an ancient being of light and shadow, leaned forward. "You are Sarai of Zalor," it said. "You fought beside the humans, risking your life for a race that once burned your world. Why?" Sarai lifted her head, her voice soft but carrying across the hall. "Because hate doesn't rebuild worlds," she said. "Because I was tired of running, tired of teaching my daughter to hide from every light in the sky. Humanity didn't ask what I was, they asked what I could do. And when I failed, they still believed I could rise again. That is something my people forgot long ago." The hall was silent. The high speaker turned its gaze to Elias. "And you, Commander? Why trust her when the galaxy said not to?" Elias looked at Sarai, then at the council. "Because trust is the only weapon humanity has left," he said simply. "Every empire out there has bigger guns, faster ships, smarter machines, but no one believes like we do. We look at the ashes and still see a home. We see an enemy and still see a person. That's what makes us human." The chamber filled with murmurs that rose like wind through ancient ruins. The council's light dimmed and flared again. "Perhaps humanity has taught us all something," it said. "From this day, the alliance between Terran and Zalari will be recognized as a union of equals. And the actions of the Resolute will mark the beginning of a new era." Sarai felt tears burn her eyes. She looked down at her daughter, who smiled as if she already knew what it meant. "Mama," Lyra whispered, "can we go to Earth someday?" Sarai smiled weakly. "Yes, baby, maybe we already have." Elias looked at her. Understanding the truth in her words, Earth was not a place. It was a way of being, a stubborn promise to survive, to forgive, to keep fighting for a better tomorrow. As they left the chamber, reporters shouted questions. flashes of light reflecting off their faces, but Sarai didn't hear them. Her gaze was fixed on the stars beyond the glass dome. So endless, so alive. She thought of her brother somewhere out there. Maybe still alive, maybe watching. She thought of the warlord's ships burning into dust, of the fear that once ruled her heart, and of the human who had changed everything with 5 simple words: "I believe in you." When the Resolute departed again, repaired and gleaming, the galaxy watched it go, not as a Terran warship, but as something more, something new. The engines ignited in silver-gold fire, a symbol of 2 worlds that had finally learned to share the same light. Elias stood on the bridge beside Sarai, their reflections blending in the glass. "Where to next?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Where the stars still need saving." The ship turned toward the unknown, its silhouette fading into the deep blue of space behind them. The Council world shone brighter than ever before. Ahead of them stretched infinity, waiting to be rewritten by the courage of those who refused to stop believing. The legend of the Resolute would echo through generations, whispered in every corner of the galaxy. They would say it wasn't strength that saved them, but compassion, not war, that united them, but trust. And somewhere in that endless sea of light, a little girl would grow up knowing that her mother and the humans had changed the fate of the stars forever.